Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about the Artemis V mission, basically humanity's next big step back to the moon. And to help us, we're going to be looking at this great overview from Wikipedia. So by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a really solid understanding of not just the mission, but also like its significance in the bigger picture of lunar exploration. Get ready for some really cool details about the tech and the people involved.
Absolutely. What's really fascinating about Artemis V is that it's more than just landing on the moon. It's really a key part of this larger goal of establishing a sustained human presence on the lunar surface.
I'm all ears. So first things first, where does Artemis V fit into the whole Artemis program?
Well, Artemis V is the fifth mission in NASA's Artemis program, and it's a huge leap forward. It's going to be the first crewed flight of the Blue Moon lander, which is a pretty major milestone.
A new lander. Okay, that's exciting. And where on the moon are they planning to land for this mission?
They're aiming for the lunar South Pole, a region that has been, a source of fascination and scientific interest for a long time.
The South Pole. Why is that location so important?
Well, it's thought to have a lot of water ice, and we're not just talking about any ice here. This is potentially a game changer for future lunar missions. If you think about it, water ice can be processed into rocket fuel and used to support a long-term human presence.
So like a kind of a lunar gas station.
Exactly. That's one of the key goals of the Artemis program, to establish that sustainable presence. And Artemis V will be the third lunar landing in this program, really showing our commitment to uncovering all the moon's potential.
So walk me through the mission. How many astronauts are going, and what will they be doing during their time on the moon?
Artemis V is sending 4 astronauts to the Lunar Gateway.
The Lunar Gateway, is that like a stop on the way to the surface?
Yeah, you could say that. It's a staging area for lunar missions, a hub for research and exploration. And Artemis V will be delivering new modules to the Gateway as it, keeps growing.
So, more than just a pit stop then. It's a growing lunar outpost. But I'm guessing the real action is happening on the surface.
Right. 2 of the astronauts will be taking the Blue Moon lander down to the lunar surface, landing near the Shackleton crater.
Okay, 2 astronauts on the moon. That is incredible. What's their main focus during their time on the surface?
Primarily to explore the area and do various scientific tasks, things like collecting samples and studying the geology. But there's another cool element. They'll be deploying the Lunar Terrain Vehicle.
Hold on, a lunar rover. Tell me more.
Think about it, astronauts driving around on the moon, exploring. The Lunar Terrain Vehicle, or LTV, will let them cover more ground and get to places that would be really tough to reach on foot. And it'll be the first time since Apollo 17 that an unpressurized rover will be used on the moon.
Unpressurized. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it means they have to wear their full spacesuits while driving. Adds a whole other layer of complexity to their lunar road trip.
Wow, talk about a tough commute. How long will they be on the surface?
They're planning for a week-long stay, which is, a pretty long time. It'll give them a chance to really dig into their research and exploration. It's a huge step from the shorter visits of the Apollo missions.
Okay, so we've got a lunar outpost, a new lander, a rover. It's a pretty complex operation. What other spacecraft are involved in all this?
You're right, lots of moving parts. Let's go through the spacecraft making this mission possible.
Okay, I'm ready for the spacecraft rundown.
Okay, so first we have the Space Launch System, or SLS. This is the powerhouse that's going to launch Orion, the crew capsule, from Earth to the moon. It's a super heavy lift launch vehicle. Like, it can carry a huge amount.
The SLS, can you give us a sense of just how big this launch vehicle is?
Oh, it's massive. Taller than the Statue of Liberty. And it produces like 8.8 million pounds of thrust during liftoff. That's more powerful than any rocket ever built, And it needs all that power to get Orion and all the cargo out of Earth's gravity and on its way to the moon.
So the SLS gets everything off the ground, and then Orion takes over.
Right. Exactly. Orion is the crew's home for that round trip between Earth and the Lunar Gateway. And the design prioritizes safety and comfort, So the astronauts have a safe and a relatively comfortable ride.
It's amazing how far spacecraft technology has come. But do these new technologies also bring new challenges?
Well, yeah, that's a good point, because with every step forward, there are always new challenges that pop up. For example, these systems are so complex that they need a lot of testing and backup systems to make sure they're reliable, especially in space, which is such a harsh environment. And then there's the constant challenge of managing the dangers of deep space travel, things like radiation exposure and the possibility of equipment failures.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pushing those technological boundaries while also making sure the crew is safe. So once Orion gets to the Lunar Gateway, what happens next?
Well, as we said earlier, the Gateway will be waiting for them. It's like a small modular space station orbiting the moon, basically a hub for lunar operations. It's a temporary home for the crew while they're in lunar orbit.
A lunar outpost in space? I love it. It's really interesting to think that Artemis V will be going to like an already established and growing lunar presence.
Yeah, that's right. By the time Artemis V arrives, the assembly of the Gateway will be well underway. It all starts in late 2024, and by then it'll be a busy hub with modules for research, living spaces, and docking for spacecraft like Orion, and of course the Blue Moon lander.
Okay, so about that Blue Moon lander, can you tell me more about what makes it so special?
Sure. The Blue Moon lander is essentially what takes the astronauts back and forth between the Gateway and the moon's surface, a vital part of the mission. And what makes it particularly interesting is that Blue Origin, the company that built it, is only the second provider after SpaceX to be given this really important task.
So Blue Origin's joining the lunar landing scene. What's their story, and what makes them different from SpaceX?
Blue Origin is a private space company started by Jeff Bezos, and they've been making some serious moves in the world of space exploration. Their big thing is reusability, which aligns really well with the Artemis program's goal of, building a lasting presence on the moon. Their unique approach to lander design and commitment to pushing the limits of technology make them a really exciting player in this whole endeavor.
It is exciting to see private companies playing such a big role in space exploration. Feels like the dawn of a new era.
Definitely. It really shows the potential of the private sector and how government agencies and private companies can work together to achieve these really ambitious goals in space.
So we've talked about the SLS, Orion, the Lunar Gateway, and the Blue Moon lander. Is there anything else we need to know about the spacecraft involved?
Oh yeah, almost forgot. There's also the Lunar Terrain Vehicle. This unpressurized rover is going to give the astronauts so much more mobility, letting them explore the lunar south pole in ways we haven't seen before.
It sounds like something right out of a science fiction movie. And speaking of teamwork, this whole mission wouldn't be possible without international collaboration. So let's look at who else is involved in making Artemis the reality.
Yeah, for sure. Artemis V is a perfect example of what we can achieve when different countries work together. The European Space Agency, or ESA, is playing a really important role. They're providing the ESPRI module for the Lunar Gateway.
ESPRI module, what does that do?
It's like a crucial support system. ESPRI will handle refueling, so spacecraft can top up their fuel while they're in lunar orbit. And it's also responsible for communication, so keeping everything connected with Earth and other spacecraft.
So like a space gas station and communications hub all rolled into one. Sounds pretty important for keeping the gateway up and running.
Exactly. And then we also have the Canadian Space Agency. They're contributing a really advanced robotic arm for the gateway.
A robotic arm, huh? What will they use that for?
This isn't just any robotic arm. It's designed to do a bunch of different things, like helping with the assembly and maintenance of the gateway, moving payloads around, and even conducting science experiments. It's a real testament to Canada's expertise in robotics and space tech.
It's amazing how all these different agencies are coming together, each bringing their own strengths to the table for this massive project.
It really shows the power of international collaboration, especially in space exploration. It's a good reminder that, when we work together, we can achieve some pretty incredible things.
Let's get back to Blue Origin for a second. They got a pretty big contract for the Blue Moon lander, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They were awarded a $3.4 billion contract for developing and demonstrating the Blue Moon lander.
Wow, that's a lot of money. What does that contract actually cover?
It covers pretty much the whole process, from designing and building it to, testing the heck out of it. It includes not just constructing the lander itself, but also carrying out a bunch of demonstration missions, one uncrewed and one crewed, just to make absolutely sure it's safe and reliable before the big day in 2030.
So a test run with actual astronauts before sending them to the moon.
You bet. Testing is super important, especially when we're talking about, people's lives. These demo missions are going to let Blue Origin really put the lander through its paces, gather data, and fine-tune the design.
Makes sense. It's a huge responsibility to be in charge of landing humans on the moon.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit here, what about the astronaut training? What do they have to go through to get ready for a mission as complex as Artemis V?
Astronaut training is, it's incredibly demanding, to say the least. We're talking about years of intense preparation, covering everything from physical conditioning and technical skills to simulated missions that recreate the challenges of space travel.
So it's not just about being in top physical shape. They have to master like a whole bunch of different skills and have tons of knowledge.
Exactly. I mean, they need to be experts in spacecraft systems, navigation, geology, even basic medical procedures. And there's a lot of training on teamwork and communication because those things are absolutely vital for, for surviving and thriving in such an extreme and isolated environment like space.
I can only imagine the kind of mental and emotional strength you'd need for a mission like that.
Yeah.
It's got to be like training for the Olympics, but with the added weight of knowing that the mission's success, maybe even your life, depends on your performance.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Astronauts are definitely a special breed, pushing those boundaries of human endurance and capability.
Speaking of pushing boundaries, how do you think this mission will change how we see the moon and our place in the universe?
Well, Artemis V has the potential to totally revolutionize our understanding of the moon. The data they'll be collecting during this mission will help us solve those mysteries about how the moon formed, its, geological history, and even its potential to support life, maybe even microbial life, which would be, well, it'd be huge.
Finding evidence of life, past or present, on the moon, that would be absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Are there any specific experiments planned for Artemis V that you're particularly interested in?
There are a bunch. One that I'm really interested in is they'll be using these special drills to extract core samples from deep below the lunar surface. And these samples could hold clues to the moon's really ancient past, and maybe even tell us more about the early solar system. And then there's another really cool experiment that aims to study the lunar exosphere, which is the extremely thin atmosphere that surrounds the moon. And this research could help us understand how the solar wind interacts with the lunar surface and how the moon's environment has changed over time.
It's amazing to think that we're actually about to uncover these secrets. Now, thinking a little more practically, what about the potential to actually use lunar resources? How could those benefit us back here on Earth?
That's a really interesting question with so many possibilities. The moon has a ton of resources, including helium-3, which is a rare isotope that some people think could be used as fuel for fusion energy.
Fusion energy. Isn't that kind of like the holy grail of clean energy that scientists have been trying to figure out?
It definitely has huge potential. Fusion energy is considered to be a clean and essentially limitless source of energy, and helium-3 is a key part of that. So, harvesting helium-3 from the moon could be a big step towards a more sustainable energy future for us here on Earth.
So the moon could actually help solve our energy problems here on Earth. That's a pretty wild thought.
It is. Of course, there are a lot of technological challenges we'll have to overcome before we can actually start mining helium-3 from the moon and using fusion energy on a large scale.
Right, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
But it just shows how space exploration and our future here on Earth are, connected. It's not just about exploring the unknown. It's about finding solutions to the problems we face right here.
Now, we've talked a lot about the technical side of the Artemis program, but what about the cultural impact? What do you think this mission will do for the public perception of space exploration?
Well, I think Artemis V could really rekindle that sense of wonder and excitement about space, much like the Apollo missions did for a previous generation.
It's like we're picking up where they left off and moving into a new era of lunar discovery. And it's not just about planting a flag this time. It's about building a permanent presence.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people really connect with that. It's not just a race to the moon, but a team effort to create something lasting there. A unified effort to uncover the moon's secrets and really tap into its potential. That's a powerful idea that goes beyond national borders and speaks to that human desire to explore the unknown. Now, out of everything we've talked about today, what do you think is the most significant thing about Artemis V? For me, it's got to be the sheer scale and ambition of the whole Artemis program. This isn't just a one-time trip. This is about really committing to a long-term human presence on the moon. It's bold, it could totally change how we think about space and open up this whole new chapter in human history.
Yeah, I totally agree. It really shows how fascinated we still are with the moon and that, that drive we have to keep pushing the limits of exploration. But, as we go further into space and set our sights on things like building a base on the moon, it brings up some really big questions too.
Like what?
Well, it makes us think about the long-term consequences of what we're doing. How will being on the moon affect its, environment? environment? What are the ethics of taking resources from another celestial body?
It's almost like we're entering this new age of exploration where we have all these new responsibilities to think about. We can't just make the same mistakes we made here on Earth.
Exactly. We've got to approach lunar exploration with a sense of stewardship, making sure what we do is sustainable and benefits future generations. It's a tough challenge that's going to take a lot of planning, cooperation between countries, and a deep understanding of the lunar environment.
It's not just about what we can do, it's about what we should do, right?
Yeah.
Are there any international agreements or guidelines in place to help us navigate these really complex issues?
Well, there are a few, like the Outer Space Treaty from 1967. It lays out some basic principles for exploring space.
Can you give me an example? What kind of principles are we talking about?
Well, for one thing, it says no to placing weapons of mass destruction in space.
Mm.
And it emphasizes that space exploration should be, for the benefit of everyone, all of humanity. It makes space a global commons belonging to all countries.
That's a good start. But does it cover specific issues like uh, extracting resources or protecting the environment on the moon?
That's where it gets a little tricky. The treaty is, well, it's a little open to interpretation, and there are a lot of discussions going on about how it applies to, modern day stuff like mining on the moon and the potential for commercial activities there.
So it sounds like we still have a long way to go in terms of creating a really solid set of rules for ethical and sustainable lunar exploration.
Oh, absolutely. Our technology keeps getting better and our ambitions are getting bigger, so we need to make sure our laws and ethics are keeping up. It's an ongoing process. It's going to take a lot of international discussion and collaboration.
It's like we're writing the rule book as we go along, you know.
Okay.
We're in uncharted territory in more ways than one.
Ah, I like that. Yeah, it's a constantly changing situation, and it really highlights the importance of being open, communicating clearly, and being willing to adapt to new challenges.
Speaking of challenges, what about the potential for conflict? Is there a risk that all of this could lead to tension or even war between nations?
It's a possibility we can't ignore. I mean, as we've been saying, the moon has valuable resources and offers strategic advantages. And competition for those things, along with national pride and the pursuit of scientific and economic dominance, it could definitely create some friction. It's a real concern, and it shows how important it is to have clear international guidelines and to foster, a sense of cooperation, not competition. We have to remember that the moon is a shared resource, and our actions there are going to affect everyone.
So how do we keep things from turning into a cosmic free-for-all, a scramble for resources and power?
Well, one of the most important things is to encourage transparency and open communication between countries. Sharing information, coordinating our activities, and working together to come up with a framework for responsible lunar exploration. International treaties and agreements are going to be essential in setting some ground rules and making sure the moon is used peacefully for the benefit of all humankind.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? Balancing those national interests with the need for international cooperation.
It is, but if you look back, history shows that we can do amazing things when we work together. Look at the International Space Station. That's a perfect example of what we can achieve when nations put aside their differences and work towards a common goal. And that's the same kind of spirit we need to bring to lunar exploration.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Artemis V and the future of lunar exploration, I want to leave our listeners with one last thing to think about. We've covered a lot: the technology, the science, the ethical dilemmas, and this fine line between conflict and cooperation. But at the end of the day, the future of lunar exploration is in our hands. What kind of legacy do we want to leave on the moon?
That's a really good question. Will it be one of ingenuity, collaboration, a commitment to sustainable exploration, or will it be a cautionary tale of missed opportunities and short-sighted thinking? The choices we make right now, they're going to shape the future of lunar exploration for generations to come.
It's a bit of a daunting thought, but also exciting. We have the power to write the next chapter in human history,
Right.
and it all starts with going back to the moon. Thanks for joining us on this journey, everyone. Keep looking up and keep exploring.